remove their head coverings. All sisters pray with their heads covered. And we face the east towards Jerusalem. Brother Mikhail, can you go ahead and open us up with prayer?
Heavenly Father, Yahweh, most holy and true covenant, Elohim, Abraham, Meshach, and Yaakov, we give all thanks and praise unto you, Father, in Yeshua's holy, mighty name, Father, our Mashiach, Father, and your holy Son. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Father, Yahweh, for allowing us, Father, Yahweh, to participate, Father, in your Yom Kippur yesterday, Father, to worship you, Father, Yahweh, and cry out to you, Father, and receive forgiveness and mercy from you, Father, Yahweh. We also thank you, Father, Yahweh, for this Shabbat also, Father. Allow us, Father, to hear your word again, Father, Yahweh, so we can learn of you, Father, Yahweh, and change our ways, Father, and repent of the things, Father, we haven't even thought of yet, Father, Yahweh. We give you thanks and praise, Father, Yahweh, for allowing us, Father, Yahweh, to be your children, Father. Thank you, Father, Yahweh, choose my name, and we pray, Father, Yahweh, that our brothers, Father, Yahweh, receive your word, Father, Yahweh, and speak it in truth, Father, from the heart, from your mouth, Father, Yahweh, from your heart, Father, Yahweh. We thank you for this word, Father, Yahweh, because this word is then cleanses, Father, Yahweh, and shows the error of our ways, Father, Yahweh, so we may repent, Father, Yahweh, and become the new creature, Father, Yahweh, which you want us to be. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks and praise in Yeshua's holy and mighty name. Amen. Amen. It's not going to happen.
Asked me about calculating holy days. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. I'm just telling you, there's so much that has to be, because I already know the confusion that's going to come your way. If I can show you one way, you have to understand the sun, the moon, the stars, and the whole movement together. So we're going to start with the moon first, and we're going to move outward, and we're going to first see all these different servants, what their jobs are. Yes, we're going to be heavy in the Sefer writings today. If you have a Sefer Bible, you have the Sefer writings, Yobelum, Jubilees, Enoch. Go get your swords, because we're going to be heavy in those today. All right, Shabbat Shalom. My name is Yadon Yasharal, with my brother Yonatan Yasharal. Shabbat Shalom. And the title of today's Shabbat study is The Lunar Doctrine. The Lunar Doctrine. And we just celebrated or observed our Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month. And one thing we know now amongst our nation is we're all over the place. Calendar here, calendar there, and there's just so many different ways to get different dates.
You have to first understand when a year starts so that you can start your calendar out. And then you got to understand how to calculate the months within the year. And then after you have the year and the months, then you got to know how to apply Wa'akra 23, Leviticus 23, and get all your holy days, your Moadim, according to the way it's written. So there's so many different stumbling blocks. And then you have certain individuals that are using just the moon to get a lunar calendar to determine their feast days. And then even within the moon, the lunar doctrine, you have people that are starting their new month with a sliver, and you have other people that are starting it with a dark moon. So then you have a confusion there. And then you have Jewish people. You have people that they don't understand anything at all. They just do what the Jewish people do. And the Jewish people, you know, they have all kind of rituals that they're doing, that they're trying to make the holy days fit into those other rituals, just like Christianity did the same thing, took from all these different pagan traditions and slid it in and said, oh yeah, this means Christ, Xmas. This is about Christmas. No, the Xmas means you insert whatever God you want to insert in there. And you have Me'as, which is a Hebrew word as well, which is a very negative term as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to first start with understanding the lunar phase. The moon has its purpose. The sun, moon, and stars, they're servants. They have their purpose. They're used for a reason, but you have to put it in its perspective, just like you can't take a king of the tribe of Benjamin and put him to be in the most holy place doing these holy sacrifices. It's out of order. That's not what he was for. We have a different servant that was chosen for that. But you can't remove the tribe, or you have 11 tribes. You can't remove the king, or you won't have a king. You have to have everything in its order. So we're going to first open up in the beginning. Let's go to Bereshit, Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to read verses 14 through 19. Can you turn on that light? Got kind of dark all of a sudden, like using eclipse up in here. Can you turn on that the one over here? Yeah. Looked outside, thought the world was ending. Much better. Thank you, brother.
Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 1, and verse 14. And Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years.
All right, so Yah said, let there be lights in the firmament of Shamayim to divide the day from the night. So the lights are up there to divide the day from the night. So what divides the day from the night? And then it says, also let them be for Moadim, signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. So these servants that are in the heavens are for us to divide the day from the night, and are for signs and for seasons and days and for years. So if we look at the Hebrew word for lights that was used, it's Meor, which is H3974. Meor or Maor. And that's from H215, and that's properly a luminous body or luminary. That is light, figuratively brightness, cheerfulness, specifically a chandelier, bright light. And then if we look at that word seasons, it's Moad, which is H4150, Moad, spelled M-O-E-D. And that's properly an appointment that is a fixed time or seasons. And that's why the holy days are appointed times. They are set apart dates. It's not necessarily a season, but it's a specific appointed date. But it could also mean a season. And that's specifically a festival, conventionally a year, By implication, an assembly, technically the congregation, by extension, the place of meeting, also a signal, appointed, sign, or time, place of solemn assembly, congregation, set feast, season, synagogue, or set time. So when you see the word moade in Hebrew, it has a broad meaning. It's not necessarily always the appointed days of Yah or just the seasons. You have to read the whole sentence in context and the whole chapter to understand what they're talking about when they're saying moade. So you also have where it says the stars. So we're going to keep reading. Go ahead.
Verse 15. And let them be for signs in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. All
right, so verse 16, we got to remember the King James is a translation. They added words in there. But I like to use the King James because I can refer to the lexicons. I can go to the Strongs and I can look at each word and see what Hebrew word was used and get the Hebrew definition in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, I can get the Greek. And here's where they're pushing a doctrine. Because the way that they wrote that here, they said, and Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And then he says, he made the stars also. But all that was written in the Hebrew, in the original Torah, was it just says a greater light to rule the day and a lesser light to rule the night. Stars. Period. So that changes the whole context of what they're saying, because they're making it look like it's a greater light that rules the day, the greater light that rules the night. And he also made stars. First of all, the sun is a star. And then second of all, it's pointing to, okay, the sun and the moon. Well, how do we know when it's daytime? When we have the sun. How do we know it's nighttime? When you have the stars. That's how you know night, and that's how you know day. You can't use the moon to determine your nighttime because the moon is out during the daytime. So this is where that confusion came. But you will never see the sun at night, and you will never see the stars, the constellations, during the daytime, unless you have an eclipse. And that was very interesting. We had that on the lunar, full solar eclipse we had in some of the places with 100% darkness. You were actually seeing the sun, moon, and stars at the same time, which was amazing. So the word stars is kobab, which is H3556. Oh, kokab, excuse me. Kokab, and that's spelled K-O-K-A-B. And that's properly from the same as H3522 or H3554, a star, figuratively a prince. So one of the understandings that people are doing is they're using that moon and they're giving it too much importance. It has its importance and we're going to get to it, but it's a servant. It has a job and you have to understand what its job is. So first we need to grasp that concept that you're not waiting for the moon to tell you it's nighttime. All right, so now we're going to get into the Sefer writing. Let's go to Jubilees chapter 6. Yobelum chapter 6. And if you do not have access to Jubilees or any of the Sefer writings or any writing we'll ever read out in our classes, we always make it available for free for download or for viewing online on IsraelitesGathering.com. You can go to Books and Bibles tab, scroll down, you will see everything. And you'll see all the tools that we use to study that we don't even present. Again, IsraelitesGathering.com if you need to get access to any of these books. 6. Yobelum, Jubilees, chapter 6. And they call Jubilees the little Genesis.
Jubilees chapter 6, verse 1. And on the new month of the 3rd month, he went forth from the ark and built an altar on that mountain. And he made atonement for the earth, and took a kid, and made atonement by its blood for all the guilt of the earth. For everything that had been on it had been destroyed, save those that were in the ark with Noah. And he placed the fat thereof on the altar, and he took an ox, and the goat, and the sheep, and kids, and salt, and a turtle dove, and the young of a dove, and placed a burnt sacrifice on the altar, and poured thereon an offering mingled with oil, and sprinkled wine, and strewed frankincense over everything, and caused a goodly savor to arise, acceptable before Yahweh. And Yahweh smelt the goodly savor, and he made a covenant with him that there should not be any more a flood to destroy the earth, that all the days of the earth, seed time and harvest, should never cease, cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night should not change their order, nor cease forever. And you, increase you and multiply upon the earth, and become many upon it, and be a blessing upon it. The fear of you and the dread of you I will inspire in everything that is on the earth and in the sea. And behold, I have given unto you all beasts and all winged things, and everything that moves on the earth, and the fish in the waters, and all things for food, as the green herbs. I have given you all things to eat. But flesh, with the life thereof, with the blood, you shall not eat, for the life of all flesh is in the blood, lest your blood of your lives be required. At the hand of every man, at the hand of every beast, will I require the blood of man.
All right, so in the beginning, that's how it was. We were responsible for everything. So when we were fast forward to the point where we were allowed to do animal sacrifices to atone for our sins, we were responsible for that bloodshed. So we had, we're supposed to have a humble and contrite spirit that we had to kill an animal that we knew we were going to be responsible for because of the transgression of our transgression against the law. Go ahead, bro.
Verse 8, whoso sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of Yahweh made he man.
And does it not say when you shed the blood of an animal, it's like you shed in the blood of a man?
Mm-hmm. Verse 9, and increase you and multiply on the earth. And Noah and his sons swore that they would not eat any blood that was in any flesh, and he made a covenant before Yahweh forever throughout all the generations of the earth in this month. On this account, he spoke to you that you should make a covenant with the children of Yasharal in this month upon the mountain with an oath, and that you should sprinkle blood upon them because of all the words of the covenant, which Yahweh made with them forever. And this testimony is written concerning you, that you should observe it continually, so that you should not eat on any day any blood of beasts or birds or cattle during the days of the earth. And the man who eats the blood of beast or of cattle or of birds during all the days of the earth, he and his seed shall be rooted out of the land. And do you command the children of Yasharal to eat no blood, so that their names and their seed may be forever before Yahweh, our sovereign ruler, continually. And for this Torah there is no limit of days, it is forever. They shall observe it throughout the generations, so that they may continue supplicating on your behalf with blood before the altar. Every day at the time of morning and evening, they shall seek forgiveness on your behalf perpetually before Yahweh, that they may keep it and not be rooted out. And he gave to Noah and his sons a sign that there should not again be a flood on the earth. He set his bow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there should not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth. For this reason, it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year, to renew the covenant every year.
All right, and the heavenly tablets are the skies, the heaven. You have the heavenly tablets, the written heavenly tablets, and then you have the stars, the sky, the whole setup in heaven. or your heavenly tablets. Go ahead.
And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years, till the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death, his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood. But Abraham observed it, and Yitzchak and Jacob and his children observed it up to your days. And in your day the children of Yasharal forgot it until you celebrated anew on this mountain.
All right, so with the people that like to disregard Enoch and disregard Jubilees, how did these individuals know to do this before Moshe? Where did they get this instruction from? They knew it. They knew it to pass it to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Jacob. Where Abraham got it from? Go ahead.
Verse 20. And do you command the children of Yasharal to observe this festival in all their generations for a commandment unto them. 1 day in the year, in this month, they shall celebrate the feast. For it is the feast of weeks and the feast of first fruits. This feast is twofold and of a double nature, according to what is written and engraved concerning it, celebrate it. For I have written in the book of the first Torah, in that which I have written for you, that you should celebrate it in its season 1 day in the year, and I explain to you its sacrifices, that the children of Yasharal should remember and should celebrate it throughout their generations in this month 1 day in every year. And on the new month of the first month, and on the new month of the 4th month, and on the new month of the 7th month, and on the new month of the 10th month are the days of remembrance.
Those are the heads of the seasons. Go ahead.
And the days of the seasons in the 4 divisions of the year. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever. And Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever, so that they have become thereby a memorial unto him. And on the new month of the 1st month he was bidden to make for himself an ark, and on that day the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. And on the new month of the 4th month the mouths of the depths of the abyss beneath were closed, and on the new month of the 7th month all the mouths of the abyss were open, and the waters began to be seen, and Noah was glad. And on this account he ordained them for himself as feasts.
Verse 27.
And on the new month of the 10th month the tops of the mountain were seen, and Noah was glad. Verse 28. And on this account he ordained them for himself as feasts for a memorial forever, and thus they are ordained. And they placed them on the heavenly tablets. Each had 13 weeks from one to another, past their memorial, and from the 1st to the 2nd, and from the 2nd to the 3rd, and from the 3rd to the 4th. And all the days of the commandment will be 52 weeks of days, and these will make the entire year complete. Thus it is engraved and ordained on the heavenly tablets.
So this is engraved and ordained in the skies. The seasons, all these things are up for us to observe, to verify that we get through the season. So if you're not getting through all these constellations, you're not getting through all these months, then you are not going through the whole year. Go ahead. And it says right there, 52 weeks of days. So you do 52 times 7. You get 364. Go ahead.
31. And there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. And command you the children of Yasharal that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days, and these will constitute a complete year. And they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts, for everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to this commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order. And they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Yasharal will forget, and will not find the paths of the years, and will forget the new months and seasons and Shabbats, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years.
And this is what happened. Now we have people that are doing a new moon, a lunar doctrine, to determine their month, which will completely mess you up because the moon is not the timekeeper. And then you have those that are forgetting the Shabbat. They're using the moon to determine when their Sabbath is. Whenever they get a new moon, then they count 7 days from that and get like, well, where are they getting this from? That's not in scripture. That's somebody that took an understanding and decided this is how we're going to do it. There's no documents telling you to do it that way. Go ahead.
Verse 35. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto you, and it is not of my own devising, for the book is written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of days is ordained.
He's telling you, look, I didn't make this up. This is what was ordained, and you can look in the sky and you can verify all these things, that it's going to happen this way forever. Go ahead.
Lest they forget the feast of the covenant and walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon.
So we're gonna go over the lunar cycle so you'll understand that concept. The moon has 29.5-day average. So that means with 12 moons, if you're using that as 12 months, you're going to get 354 days in a year. That is not going to get you through all of the constellations in the sky. That's not going to get you through the whole seasons, all the seasons. You're not going to get all your seasons when you only have 354 days. So if you have 354 days, you're starting in the wintertime when you're year. And then you do 354 days, you're moving further and further and further behind. 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. Eventually, you're going to be somewhere in summertime or way early in the winter to start your year. So this is why he gave us these witnesses for us to, while we were in the wilderness, be able to look up at the sky and see these things. Now the moon has its own sign. It is also something for us to use given what our trade were. When we look at what Noah did, the first thing he did was build a vineyard. He started being a husbandman. So the moon has its purpose, and we're going to go into how it's supposed to be used. It worked with our trade, but it is not that simple for us to use a lunar cycle like the Greeks and the Romans did with the Julian calendar and all that, and expect that we're going to be able to keep Yahweh's holy days in its seasons with just looking at a moon. Go ahead.
Verse 37. For this reason, the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day the day of testimony, and an unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the Kodesh with the unclean, and the unclean day with the Kodesh, for they will go wrong as to the months and Shabbats and feasts and jubilees. For this reason I command and testify to you, that you may testify to them. For after your death your children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new months and seasons and Shabbats and festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh.
All right, so we were warned about this. We were warned that this is what would happen if we did not follow the signs that we have in the sky to keep us on point in the year. And that's exactly what happened. And it disturbed all of our feast days. And this is why we all over the place. But if we are to follow the heavenly tablets and we look in the sky and we verify these things and confirm these things, we will all, it doesn't matter where you at. We're going to all be on the same schedule, the same everything, because the sky ain't going to change. All right. Let's go to Enoch chapter 73. We're going to look at the course of the moon. The book of Enoch chapter 73.
Let's see.
And you can see why they didn't want us to see this, because this goes against what the Greeks were doing. The Greeks were worshiping the moon. They had Diana, the queen of heaven. They used to bake what we call cupcakes now, those little small cakes that were for the moon. And we had prophets constantly tell us, don't do this. What are you doing? You're not to worship these things. These things are for signs and for seasons, for days and years, so you can keep the persons that you're supposed to worship feast days. So being that when they translated this from Greek and all these different languages, they started to insert their doctrine in there to get us to do the worship the way they did. But they removed all these books. They said, no, because this goes against the doctrine we're trying to teach. So we're not going to use this. We know it's ancient. We knew it predated Torah, but we're going to pull it out. We're just going to use the things we want to use that's going to benefit the doctrine we're trying to teach. But when you put all these books together in the Ethiopian Bible, which has all of these different Sefer writings and all the Torah together, there's no contradiction. When you put it together, when you're reading it in at least an African language, there's no contradiction. But when you start to translate it into English and you're using their translation of things, now you have contradiction. So people will just throw it out completely because it goes against the Jewish and the Greek doctrine that they were taught. But you can't throw out the stars. You can't throw out the seasons. The book of Enoch, chapter 73. And if you are using Enoch and Sefer or some of the other books of Enoch, it may be a chapter off. It may be 72 or maybe 74, but it's right around there, and it's going to all say the same thing. It's just the way they divided the chapters, because it came out of the Dead Sea Scrolls with pieces that they put it together. They divided it a little bit differently, but it's all saying the same thing. And you'll see the Masons and different people that are heavy on this knowledge, and they'll pull from these books because these are things that are not necessarily religious. They're not going to use the aspect of worshiping the Most High, but they're going to use the science of it and say, I want to understand the stars. I want to understand the seasons. I want to understand these things that's going to when you'll see later what the moon is for, which is going to generate more profitability. They're going to look at all these different things, and they're going to hide that so that you won't have that knowledge. That knowledge wasn't necessarily for commerce, but they'll hide the commerce aspect for it and cause us not to be able to understand how to calculate these things so that we can keep our feast days.
Enoch 73 in verse 1. After I saw this set of regulations for the sun, I saw another set of regulations concerning the minor luminary whose name is the moon. Its roundness is like the roundness of the sky, and the wind drives the chariot on which it rides, and it is given light in varying measure. Its coming out and its going in change every month. Its days are like the days of the sun, and when its light becomes evenly distributed, then it amounts to 1/7 the light of the sun. It, the moon, rises in this manner. Its head faces the easterly direction, coming out on the 30th day. On that day, that is, on the 30th day, it comes into existence, and it appears with the sun in the gate through which the sun exits, and you have the beginning of the month. Considering half of it to be divisible into 7 parts, the whole disk of it is without light, with exception of 1/7 part of the 14th part of the light of the sun, 1/7 of its half light. On the day when it receives 1/7 part of its 1/2, as the sun sets, it becomes equivalent to 1/7 light of 1/2 of it. Then when the sun rises, the moon rises together with it, taking a portion of 1/2 of its light, that the moon, just beginning its monthly journey on its first lunar day, sets with the sun and becomes dark.
Okay, all right, so understanding here, this is important. Then when the sun rises, the moon rises together with it, taking a portion of 1/2 of its light. That night, the moon, just beginning its monthly journey on its first lunar day, sets with the sun and becomes dark. So the new moon is the dark moon, but there's confusion here because our days start at night. So at that night, the moon is going to be dark on the new moon. But in the daytime portion that proceeds after it, we'll continue reading. We'll get to that. Go ahead.
And what verse are we on, 7?
We're on, start over verse 7.
Then when the sun rises, the moon rises together with it, taking a portion of 1/2 of its light. That night, the moon, just beginning its monthly journey on the first lunar day, sets with the sun and becomes dark. In respect to its 13 parts that night, on that day, it rises and shines with exactly 1/7 part of its semicircle.
All right. The moon is seen during the daytime and the nighttime. That's why it's not the ruler of the night. So it becomes dark, completely dark on new moon, the first lunar day. But the same lunar day that started at night, during the daytime is when you're going to see that slight little sliver before that in between time before it's getting ready to go into the next day. So you'll see it. So that's what they're looking for when they go up and they look for that sliver. So that caused confusion. So now people were confused by that and said, well, at nighttime, until I see that sliver, that is the new month. And that's what Jewish people do. They look at the moon, they look for that sliver at night, but they're starting on the second day. The night before, it was dark, and in the daytime portion, you'll see that little sliver, and then in that night, you're going to see that same little sliver. And what you have to understand is what Yahweh does is he always uses two witnesses. You have one witness at night, new month, boom, pitch black. The next, during the daytime portion, there it is. You see the sliver of that little moon before you go into the nighttime of the second day. There's your second witness. So you know that it's new month. Or excuse me, you know that is new moon. Go ahead.
Verse 8. Then it comes out and recedes toward the east, away from where the sun rises, continuing to be brighter in 1/6 of 1/7 of 1/2 of the light of the sun during the remaining days.
All right, go on to, actually, let me go over the moon phases. I wanted to project it on the television, but our setup is not going to allow for that to happen. So we're going to briefly explain the lunar cycle, how that works. So you have the moon. The moon, just like the stars and the sun, everything goes from east to west. If you look at the stars move westerly. The stars, constellations come from the east, it moves from the west. The sun rises in the east, sets in the west. The lunar phases work the same exact way. It starts dark, and then the sunlight comes from the east to the west over the moon. So from east to west, you'll have a dark moon, and then the light comes in, and you'll have a little crescent moon, and then you'll have a half moon, all the way until you have a full moon, which is halfway through your lunar cycle. So in your lunar cycle, you have dark moon, new moon. When it's full, you have halfway through the lunar month. And then it starts to do the same thing. The shadow starts to now come over the full moon from east to west, and it starts to darken up again, all the way until you get to new moon again. So everything moves from east to west. So you have, when you have a new moon, dark moon. Then you have the little crescent, which, you know, everybody sees, a little crescent moon. That is waxing crescent, when the light is on the right side of the moon, because that means it was dark and the light is coming in from the right. That is your waxing crescent. Now, when it starts to go past halfway of the moon full, now you start to have waxing gibbous. Waxing means growing, waning means shrinking. So when you're waxing, it's waxing from a half moon to a full moon. That's waxing gibbous. When it becomes full, now it starts to go, the shadow comes in from the east, and it starts to wane smaller. So that's waning gibbous. Gibbous is the full, crescent is the little crescent moon. So it's waning gibbous because it's shrinking from a full moon all the way into waning crescent, which means it is now waning to a crescent moon. The shadow is moving across the full lit moon till now it's a crescent on the other side, because it's waning, it's shrinking to a crescent moon all the way until you get back to the new moon. So it's very simple. Everything follows it. You need to look at it a few times to get the understanding, but even children can understand it. Children can go look up at the moon and say, oh, you know, it's waning gibbous or it's waxing gibbous. The most simplistic way to understand it: dark moon, new moon. Full moon, you know, you're halfway through the month, the lunar month, halfway through the lunar month. So that's the simplest way to understand it. All right, let's move on to Enoch 74. Now, where a lot of confusion comes in people's understanding the word English, the word moon and month is synonymous. It's very similar. That's the only language that is like that. Every other language is a different word for month and for moon. Completely different. But with this Babel language that we have that's took from everybody, all these different languages, that's what they put in there to push their doctrine. Because it's not the same. Because in Hebrew, there's a different word for a lunation, which is a lunar month, and a month, a calendar month. There's completely different words. In the Greek, same thing. They have completely different words. Enoch, chapter 74, and we're going to start this at verse 1, and we're going to look at this relationship between the sun and the moon in days and years.
Furthermore, I saw another system of rotation with its own regulation whereby the system fulfills its monthly course of movement. All these things, including their fixed position, Uriel, the Kodesh Malach, who is the guide of all of them, showed it to me. And I wrote down their fixed positions as he showed them to me, and I wrote down their months as they were, as well as the variable aspects of their illumination until the completion of 15 days. The moon wanes in 15 steps during a period of 15 days, and waxes in 14 steps in the east and the west respectively. In certain designated months, it alters its westerly settings, and in certain designated months, it fulfills its unusual courses of movement. For in 2 months, the moon, sets with the sun and uses those 2 middle openings which are in the 3rd and 4th gate. It comes out for 7 days and completes a circuit as it returns again to the gate through which the sun rises. In this manner, it waxes and recedes from the sun, entering in the 6th gate through which the sun rises in 8 days.
So we'd have to go over the gates for you to understand what the gates are. The gates are just like, if you picture a rainbow, you have a rainbow like this. The sun goes from east to west, east to west. So this is, to me, in my perspective, this would be east, but to you it would be this way. So it goes east to west. So you have one gate here, one gate here, one gate here, like so forth and so on. Then it goes back up like this. The 3rd and 4th gate, the 4th gate is where the year starts, spring. So the moon is doing the same thing, east to west, east to west, east to west, just like the sun. And depending on how high the sun is and how low the sun is, gives you your seasons, how close it is. So the moon operates very similar, but it doesn't move the same speed and way that the sun moves. Go ahead.
Verse 6. It comes out for 7 days and completes a circuit as it returns to the gate through which the sun rises. In this manner, it waxes and recedes from the sun, entering the 6th gate through which the sun rises in 8 days. When the sun rises through the 4th gate, the moon comes out for 7 days until it starts coming out through the 5th. It then turns back towards the 4th gate in 7 days, waxing as it recedes, and enters the 1st gate in 8 days. Then again it returns to the 4th gate through which the sun rises in 7 days. This is how I saw their fixed positions, how the moon rises and shines when the sun sets in those days. In 5 years, the combined sun gains 50 extra days. Consequently, one of those 5 years gains, and when it is completed, the moon falls behind the sun and stars for 30 days. They bring about all the years punctiliously.
Hold on, what did you just read?
Let me go back at 10. In 5 years, the combined sun, if 5 years are combined, the sun gains 50 extra days. Consequently, one of those 5 years gains, and when it is completed, it turns out to be 364 days. The gain of the sun and of the stars turns out to be 10 days in 3 years. 10 days every year add up to 30 days. And the moon falls behind the sun and the stars for 30 days.
All right, so it falls behind the sun and the star because the sun is a star. So the stars have a certain rotation that they follow that gives us the year, 364 days. The moon falls behind every year 10 days because it does not follow the same speed for it to complete its cycle. So this is why you can't just use a moon to calculate your year, because your year is all over the place because it's constantly falling behind from the heavenly tablets. Go ahead.
Verse 12. They bring about all the years punctiliously, so that they forever neither gain nor fall behind according to their fixed positions for a single day. But they convert the year with punctilious justice into 364 days. In 3 years, there are 1,092 days, and in 5 years, 1,820 days, so that in 8 years, there are 2,912 days. For the moon singly in 3 years, its days add up to 1,062 days, so that it falls behind 30 days in 3 years. In 5 years, they add up to 1,870 days, so that it falls behind 50 days in 5 years. Thus it is for the moon. In 8 years, the days add up to 2,832 days, so that it falls behind 80 days in 8 years. In this way, the years are completed with precision according to their fixed positions in the universe and the fixed stations of which the sun shines, the gate through which the sun rises and sets for 30 days.
All right. Go to Enoch chapter 78. So I know it's a little bit difficult to understand at first if you haven't been looking at this. I mean, it was difficult for us. It took years for us to grasp this understanding. And the moon is still something that I don't even completely understand. It operates on its own course. It's different. It's not as easy as the sun and the stars that are constantly up there and are even. So the moon has its own course, and it has super moons and all different things which are a little bit differently because it's not a true luminary. It doesn't shine its own light. It gets light from a reflection of the sun. So its light is depending on its position to the sun and the seasons within the sun. Whereas the stars are constantly moving in the same pattern. So the simplest way to understand that is the moon is going to be 10 years behind the stars and the sun every year. And it's constantly moving behind all the time. 10 days. And it doesn't, none of those 10 days disappear. It adds up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. But even a broke clock will be right twice a day. So it's going to eventually catch up. But it's behind. So this is why you can't use it by itself. That's not its job. That's like looking at a clock and say, I'm going to use the little hand only. You ain't going to have an accurate time. You might be accurate twice a day. But it's not going to be accurate all the time because you need the other parts to tell you exactly where you are. So we're going to go to Enoch chapter 78.
Enoch 78 verse 1. These are the names of the sun. The first, Oriares, the second, Tomas. The moon has 4 names. Its first name is Asenia, the second, Alba, the third, Banes, the fourth, Era.
Now, what's interesting is why would they have the second name of the sun Tomas, which is twin in Hebrew? I don't know. If you know, send me an email. That's interesting. Go ahead.
Verse 3. These are the 2 great luminaries. Their roundness is like the roundness of the sky, and the magnitude of their roundness is equivalent for both. There are 7 more portions of light that move in the sun's sphere than the moon's, and it increases in measure until 70 portions of the sun are completed. The moon comes in and goes out by western openings. The circles via the northeast and rises through the eastern openings upon the face of the earth. When the moon begins its cycle, it appears in the sky 1/2 of a 7th part. It will become fully illuminated from the 14th day.
Remember, halfway through the cycle, you have your full moon. Go ahead.
It completes its illumination the 15th, becoming fulfilled according to the sign of the year and becoming 15 parts. Thus the moon waxes in 15 parts. In its waning, the moon decreases on the first day to 14 parts of its light. On the second day, it decreases to 13 parts of its light. On the third to 12 parts. The 7th to 8 parts. On the 11th to 4.
Hold on.
To 8 parts. On the 8th to 7 parts.
On the 4th to 11 parts. On the 5th to 10 parts. On the 6th to 9 parts. On the 7th to 8 parts. on the 8th to 7 parts, on the 9th to 6 parts, on the 10th to 5 parts, on the 11th to 4 parts, on the 12th to 3 parts, on the 13th to 1/2 of preceding, on the 14th all its light decreases to 1/2 of 1/7, and on the 15th all the remaining light disappears. I know you're reading on that little
Yeah.
try to read that on your phone. It's a little difficult. Go to verse 9.
In certain fixed months, the moon completes its cycle 29 days, in others every 28. Then Uriel showed me another order concerning the light, when the light is beamed into the moon, from which direction the bright sun is beamed. During all the seasons when the moon is made to run its cycle, the light is being beamed into it, the moon, facing the sun until the illumination of the moon is completed in the course of 14 days. And when it is lit completely, it radiates light in the sky. On the first day, it is called the new moon, because on that day the illumination begins to set.
All right, so that's also where that confusion is caused. They see on that day the illumination begins to set upon it. So they're thinking that, okay, since the day starts at night, when at nighttime when you see that sliver, that means this new month or new moon per se. New moon because of that. No, that's not true, because you have to read the rest of the chapters where it tells you that on that first day is completely dark. And it's not only completely dark on that day. It's dark previous days before that as well. But the second witness is it's completely dark that night, and the daytime preceding that, which is the same day, the day started at night, now you see the sliver. That's your second witness letting you know. So you're still looking for that sign. Go ahead.
These illuminations are completed with exactitude on the day when the sun descends into the west, and the moon simultaneously rises in the east in the evening, shining during the night until the sun rises the opposite it, and it is over against the sun, from the same side where the light entered the moon. From there it gradually wanes until all the illumination disappears and the days of the moon expire, its disk empty without light. The moon coordinates in respect to its days and seasons 4 3-month divisions. In the course of its recession, it makes 3 months, each in 30 days, and 3 months, each in 29 days. During this season, it makes its recession in the first period, starting in the first gate, in 177 days. In the course of its progression, it appears 3 months, each in 30 days, and 3 months, each in 29 days. By night, it appears like a man. By day, it appears like the sky, for there is no other thing in it except its light.
All right. Now let's go to Enoch chapter 80. Now, this is an important chapter because it's warning us about what happens when you're trying to, the same thing Jubilees warned. It's another witness to trying to use that moon by itself.
Enoch 80 and verse 1. In those days the angel Uriel responded and said to me, Behold, I have shown you everything, Enoch, and I have revealed everything to you, so that you might see this sun, this moon, and those that guide the stars of heaven, as well as all those who interchange their activities and their seasons and rotate their processions. In respect to their days, the sinners and the winter are cut short. Their seeds shall lag behind in their lands and their fertile fields, and in all their activities upon the earth. He will turn and appear in their time and withhold rain, and the sky shall stand still. Then the vegetables shall slacken and not grow in its season, and the fruit shall not be born in its proper season.
And this is why you can't use what the Jewish people use too. Like, well, we're waiting on the barley to turn green, so that's when a bib starts. No, you can't do that. That's not, there's nothing in Torah telling us to sit and look for the greens to see when it's going to turn green. That's not how it's in the heavenly tablets that we're supposed to be looking at those signs. Go ahead.
Verse 4, the moon shall alter its order and will not be seen according to its normal cycles. In those days it will appear in the sky, and it shall arrive in the evening in the extreme ends of the great lunar path in the west, and it shall shine more brightly, exceeding the noble degree of light.
And that's what we just read in verse 78, how it changes. Excuse me, chapter 78. It changes. It's not the same. Some days it's 30, another days it's 29. It's 29. Go ahead.
Many of the chiefs of the stars shall make errors in respect to the orders given them. They shall change their courses and functions and not appear during the seasons which have been prescribed for them. All the orders of the stars shall harden in disposition against the sinners and the conscience of those that dwell upon the earth. They, the stars, shall err against them, the sinners, and modify all their courses. Then they, the sinners, shall err and take them, the stars, to be gods. And evil things shall be multiplied upon them, and plagues shall come upon them so as to destroy all.
Now, that's verse 7 is a very deep verse because there's multiple layers in that. It's also looking at the stars and taking the stars in heaven to be gods, saying, this is a god, Zeus and Pleiades or whatever, all these different constellations saying that they're gods. But also when it's talking about stars, it also talks about us as stars as well. And there's different scriptures that show that they're talking about princes, talking about us, taking us to be gods as well. So it's very deep and probably a whole different class to kind of break that down. But let's go into Deuteronomy chapter 4, talking about don't take these things in heaven and make them your gods. Don't give them more importance than what they are. They're for signs and for seasons. They are not your gods. And how we make them our gods is when we decide I'm not going to follow the instructions that we were given on how to use these and say, no, I'm going to take this moon because it's so beautiful and it's so easy for me to look at, and I'm going to make that determine how I do my holy days. Or I'm going to worship this. I'm going to say that this is my instruction.
Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 1. Now therefore, hearken, O Yasharal, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach you, for to do them, that you may live and go in and possess the land which Yahweh Elohim of your fathers gives you. You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it, that you may keep the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim which I command you. Your eyes have seen what Yahweh did because of Baal Peor. For all the men that followed Baal Peor, Yahweh your Elohim has destroyed them from among you. But you that did cleave unto Yahweh your Elohim are alive, every one of you this day. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me that you should do so in the land where you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who has Elohim so near unto them as Yahweh our Elohim is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Only take heed to yourself and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things which your eyes have seen, and lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. But teach them your sons and your sons' sons, especially the day that you stood before Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb, when Yahweh said unto me, gather me the people together, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they shall live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children. And you came near and stood under the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire unto the midst of heaven with dark clouds and thick darkness. And Yahweh spoke unto you out of the midst of the fire. You heard the voice of the words, but saw no similitude, only heard you a voice. And he declared unto you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, even 10 commandments, and he wrote them upon 2 tables of stone. And Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments, that you might do them in the land where you go over to possess it. Take you therefore good heed unto yourselves, for you saw no manner of similitude on the day that Yahweh spoke unto you in Horeb out of the midst of the fire, lest you corrupt yourselves, and make you a graven image, the similitude of any figure, the likeness of male or female.
All right. So he warned us about this because this is what the nations were doing. And you look at even some of these newer religions. You have Islam. They got the little crescent moon. You know, the Eastern stars or whatever. They got that little symbol with the moon and all that type of stuff. Then you have what's the other one? The Babylonian god. He got a
Dagon.
He got a moon over their head with the thing that what's her name did? Well, I forgot the name of the little pagan god.
Serapis.
Something like that, or Semi-Samaram, whatever. That supposed to be Nimrod's mother or whatever.
Yeah,
They have a moon with the two
Yeah.
crescent moons on the side of it or whatever. So this is something that they have been doing. The heathens have been doing that for years, even to the point where they're copying that now with what's her name? Beyonce just did that with her belly out and the moon thing over her head.
Basically, they don't put the Baphomet they're dealing with like that.
Right. They're doing all these different things. And this is what Yahweh was warning us about. This is what the other nations did. They took these signs in the sky and they made gods out of it. They said, this is so beautiful. This has to be a god. Go ahead.
Verse 19. And lest you lift up your eyes unto heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven should be driven to worship them and serve them, which Yahweh your Elohim has divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. But Yahweh has taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace, even out of Mitzrayim, to be unto him a people of inheritance, as you are this day. Furthermore, Yahweh was angry with me for your sakes, and swore that I should not go over Jordan, and that I should not go in unto the good land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. But I must die in this land. I must not go over Jordan, but you shall go over and possess that good land. Take heed unto yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, which he made with you, and make you a graven image or likeness of anything which Yahweh your Elohim has forbidden you.
All right. We skipped over some verses here. Go back to verse 17 and start from there.
Verse 17. The likeness of any beast that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged fowl that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the waters beneath the earth. And lest you lift up your eyes unto heaven, and when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven should be driven to worship them and serve them, which Yahweh your Elohim has divided unto all nations under the whole heaven.
All right. So he gave all of those things, which we'll also read in Enoch. He gave those things for the nations to worship. Let them worship the stars and all that stuff. You have a true living Elohim to worship. That's not for you to worship. The nations have angels, princes over them that are leading them and teaching them all these weird practices of worshiping the sun and the moon and stars and all these different things to keep Yasharal sanctified so that we could be the standard bearers. Look, that's what everybody else does. But these people are different. These are sanctified people. They are using it as signs. They are worshiping a true living Elohim. They're not worshiping a servant. They're not worshiping a servant. They're using the servant. Go ahead. Go back, drop back down to where you were.
Verse 23. Take heed unto yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, which he made with you, and make you a graven image or the likeness of anything which Yahweh your Elohim has forbidden you. For Yahweh your Elohim is a consuming fire, even a jealous. When you shall beget children and children's children, and you shall have remained long in the land, and shall corrupt yourselves and make a graven image or the likeness of anything, and shall do evil in the sight of Yahweh and your Elohim to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that you shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto you go over Jordan to possess it. You shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall utterly be destroyed. And Yahweh shall scatter you among the nations, and you shall be left few in number among the heathen, where Yahweh shall lead you. And there you shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. But if from there you shall seek Yahweh your Elohim, you shall find him, if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul.
And that's part of what atonement was for yesterday, was for us to seek Yahweh, to open up our hearts unto him, and to pour out all the things in our lives that are keeping us separate from the Most High, that are keeping us unclean and making us unholy. If we open up our heart and we seek him and we truly ask him to deliver us from these things that are causing us to be unclean, he will deliver us. That's how merciful he is. And he's so merciful that he said, you know what, I have to dedicate one day for the children of Yasharal to do this, because some people are so carnal that they won't do this unless I command them to do it one day. Because they will go down this as a checklist and say, don't do this, don't do that, and don't do that. If you do that, just offer this animal and you're good. Just offer this sin offering and you're good. Just pay this price, basically, because this is your livestock, was your money. So he had to give us a day where he could get all of us to sit down and spend the day to reflect on our sins, so that he could send his spirit into us to expose these things. And some of these things that we pray, that we didn't even pray for. A lot of stuff that's still in us that hasn't even been exposed for us. And that's when the Holy Spirit has to make intercession for us in utterances, when we're sitting there just quiet, just thinking and praying to the Most High. And there's no words coming out, but we're just sitting there and having a silent conversation with the Most High. And the Holy Spirit is asking for forgiveness and interceding for us on these things that are too ugly for us even at this point to look at. Go ahead, Elder.
Let me go to that, brother, because I believe, this is where we went wrong, because we were taught by, Goyim, our book, and they taught us to, worship wood and stone, as well as we were told that we went against the Most High many years before that, then we will go into the land that we don't understand the language, and we will worship wood and stone because we were so disobedient to him. And he tried to let us know that in Exodus chapter 4 about what was not to do with our commandments.
Right.
And he reiterated again, he went even further in Deuteronomy chapter 4 about what he had done for us and the rest of the nations to try and keep us on point. So if we need to turn back to Yahweh and do exactly what he said, because even now, our people read in the churches, and been taught by their pastors, and priests and so forth, but yet, do they ever read over the commandments of Yahweh telling you about your 10 commandments? Do they ever read over this? And if they ever read over this, don't they recognize what he said about images? So our people are truly blind, and they can't see when he tells them, do not make any image nor similitude, of anything in his word, to represent him. But yet, praise God that he is allowing us to open our eyes and teach others to open their eyes to what the word truly says in front of them when they read it over and over again. So hopefully they will see the truth and worship Yahweh in truth and spirit.
You had something, brother?
Yeah, even those last few that we just read a while ago, when it says something about Yahweh scattering us and we serving gods of stone and wood that don't hear, see, or smell. What that shows is that Yahweh, being the light, is our only source of like intelligence and understanding. And if we're not seeking him, we're gonna go and be just like those dumb idols in those places. They don't see, smell. That means we're going to lose our sense of reasoning. We're going to lose compassion. We're going to be angry. We're going to be like the things we're serving and just void of the truth that Yah brings. But he's saying if you're in these places that are going to suck you dry of your understanding, that's going to suck you dry of your love, going to suck you dry of your compassion, in those places you're going to realize that something terrible is happening to your soul. Something terrible is happening in your spirit. And if you have sense enough, and if that little bit of light is left in me, use that and direct it toward my holy temple, where I will see, and you petition me with all your heart, knowing that there's something overcoming you. There's a deafness, there's a dumbness, there's a darkness, there's a blindness that's taking you over and taking the life out of you. And you have to reach out Because anytime you turn towards Yah, you realize that, hold on, there's a beauty here. It's almost like when you're outside and like everywhere is shade and you walk past two houses and you feel that heat between the two houses. And you're like, hold on, when I step back here, I felt that heat from the sun. Mm-hmm. And you can look, it's like almost that radiation of Yah, that light of Yah, saying, look in this direction, this narrow path between all these things that are blocking your light. Look in this direction so I can lighten you in this environment that's holy in idolatry, that's sucking you dry of his living essence. And he will come to you if you seek him with all your soul, and he will liberate you from all that's holding your soul captive. Come. Verse 30. When you are in tribulation, and all these things are come upon you, even in the latter days, when the stars shall harden against the sinners and stuff in these latter days. Right. If you turn to Yahweh your Elohim and shall be obedient to his voice, for Yahweh your Elohim is a merciful El, he will not forsake you, neither destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers which he sware unto them. For ask now of the days that are past, which are before you, since the day that Yahweh created man upon the earth, and ask from the one side of heaven unto the other, whether there has been any such thing as great as this thing is, or has been heard like it. Did ever people hear the voice of Elohim speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard and live? Or has Elohim essayed to go and take him a nation from the midst of another nation by temptations, by signs, and by wonders, and by war, and by a mighty hand, and by a stretched out arm, and by great terrors, according to all that Yahweh your Elohim did for you in Mitzrayim before your eyes? Unto you it was showed, that you might know that Yahweh, he is Elohim, there is none else beside him.
So he's shown himself to us and to our nation. Amos chapter 3, you alone of all the nations of the earth have I known. He has shown himself to. So we know that star, that sun, that moon, that is not our God. We are not to worship that. We are not to give it a higher importance than what it's for days, to divide the day from the night, and for times and for season and for years. It's not to be anything more than that. And we can't take that and say, well, because the moon moves this way, I want to change it to mean this or mean that, when the mathematics don't add up, when the rest of all the other services are telling me, this don't add up. This is not right. This is not right. No. I'm going to follow that right there. Now you have made that your God. Because you're saying, I'm going to follow this. The same goes if we look at the stars, the sun, and the moon. We take all this and say, you know what? Because it's just beautiful today, today's going to be the Shabbat. Because this is the one day that, the moon turns red or the sun disappeared during the daytime. So today must be the Shabbat. There's no difference in that. You are taking that to be your God because you are listening to the instruction that you were given by your ancestors to follow what you're looking in the sky to do against what we were instructed to do. This is why Yah always gives us at least 2 or more witnesses. This is why he says 2 or more gathered in the midst, there I am in the midst. Excuse me, 2 or 3 or more gathered in my name, there I am in the midst. Because there has to be at least 2 witnesses to confirm a matter. So this is why you can't just look at a moon and say, look, this is it. It's done. It's confirmed. Where's your second witness? There is no second witness, because the stars, which is the sun and all the Mazzaroth, all the constellations, are being like, I don't know what you're talking about. That don't add up. Furthermore, he behind. He back there. Go ahead, brother.
Verse 36. Out of heaven he made you to hear his voice, that he might instruct you, and upon earth he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved your fathers, therefore he chose their seed after them, and brought you out in his sight with his mighty power out of Mitzrayim, to drive out nations from before you, greater and mightier than you are, to bring you in, to give you land, their land for an inheritance, as it is this day. Know therefore this day, and consider it in your heart, that Yahweh, he is Elohim in heaven above, and upon the earth beneath, there is none else. You shall keep therefore his statutes and his commandments, which I command you this day, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days upon the earth, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you forever. Then Moshe severed 3 cities on this side Jordan toward the sun rising, that the slayer might flee there, which should kill his neighbor unawares, and hated him not in times past, and that fleeing unto one of these cities he might live, namely Bezer in the wilderness, in the plain country of the Reubenites, and Ramoth in Gilead of the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan of the Manassites. And this is the law which Moshe set before the children of Yasharal. These are the testimonies and the statutes and the judgments which Moshe spoke unto the children of Yasharal after they came forth out of Mitzrayim. On this side Jordan in the valley, over against Bath Peor, in the land of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon, who Moshe the children of Yasharal smote after they were come forth out of Mitzrayim.
So he had to give these statutes and judgments and laws and testimonies unto the children of Yasharal again, because we just read in Jubilees and Enoch, this was already here. This was in these books already. And the patriarchs were already doing these things, and then they stopped doing that. They started worshiping these hosts of heaven and worshiping these mighty men and changing up the way they did things and completely forgot. To the point when they say, you know, Moshe's like, who should I tell them? Who should I tell them sent me? He's telling them Yahweh. You're like, who is this guy? Tell us about him. They didn't understand the Shem of Yahweh. They had been so far removed that they had lost. They had known all these other Egyptian gods and all these Babylonian gods. They knew all those things, but forgot who Yahweh is. And that's why he had to ask the question, who should I tell him? Who should I tell him this is? Tell him I am that I am. I am that I am. Everything that is, I am that. That's who sent you. But Yahweh, Elohim, that is my name forever. That is who you shall memorialize. It wasn't like they didn't know the name before. Who you think they were calling on before? They were saying, oh, mysterious one in the sky. They knew Yah's name. He came out and talked to people. He had angels go to people. He took Enoch up. So they had all this information and it was lost. The same thing that's happening to us this very day. We are now finding this stuff like, oh, wow, look, Yahweh just gave me all this information. No, this information was here before. We have to go back to the original way of doing things. We got to get rid of these clocks and these calendars and all these things and be able to look up at the sky and say, okay, we are halfway through this lunar cycle. What does that mean? Okay, that means I can do this or do this for my job. Look at the constellations, look at the sun, and look at the moon for another witness. Stars and the moon and all these things are saying verify, yes, that means we're in this season. Go ahead.
Verse 47. And they possessed his land and the king of Og, his land of Og, king of Bashan, the 2 kings of the Amorites, which were on this side Jordan towards the sun rising. From Aroer, which is by the bank of the river Arnon, even unto Mount Sion, which is Hermon, and all the plain on this side Jordan, eastward, even unto the sea of the plain, under the springs of Pisgah.
So Mount Zion is Hermon? That's interesting. I didn't know that. All right. Let's go to Tehillim 104, Psalms 104. And Psalms 104 is one of the verses that they have made a doctrine out of to justify using the moon to calculate your months and your holy days.
Psalm 104. Psalm 104 and verse 1. Bless Yahweh, O my soul. O Yahweh, my Elohim, you are very great. You are clothed with honor and majesty. Who covers yourself with light as with a garment, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain, who lays the beams of his chambers in the waters, who makes the clouds his chariot, who walks upon the wings of the wind, who makes his angels spirits, his ministers a flaming fire, who laid the foundations of the earth that it should not be removed forever. You cover it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the voice of your thunder they hasted away. They go up by the mountains, they go down by the valleys, unto the place which you has founded for them. You have set a bound, that they may not pass over, that they turn not again to cover the earth. He sends the springs into the valleys, which run among the hills. They give drink to every beast of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. By them shall the fowls of the heaven have their habitation, which sing among the branches. He waters the hills from his chambers. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your works. He causes the grass to grow for the cattle, and herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth, and wine that makes glad the heart of man, and oil to make his face to shine, and bread which strengthens man's heart. The trees of Yahweh are full of sap, the cedars of Lebanon which he has planted, where the birds make their nests. As for the stork, the fir trees are her house. The high hills are a refuge for the wild goats, and the rocks for the conies.
So all the way up to this point, he's talking about the creation and how beautiful it is, and what is done and how it follows order. All of this, he's talking about the creation. We got to keep in mind what we're talking about here, and what is the theme of this chapter. Go ahead.
He appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knows his going down.
Okay, so he's talking about this creation. He appointed the moon for the seasons. The sun knows his going down. So all these things follow order. So what people have done is they have taken, he appointed the moon for seasons, and the sun knows his going down, and said, you see, he appointed the moon for Moade, which is an appointed time, which is also meaning, but they literally translated it right. They said seasons. A holy day is not a season. An appointed time is not a season. But what you see here is given an overimportance of this one verse and creating a lunar doctrine out of it. So let's break this down into the Hebrew. It says he appointed, which we know is Moade. He appointed the moon for Moade. We read the definition of that. Let's look at the word that they use for moon. The word that they use for moon is the literal Hebrew meaning for moon. The Hebrew word for moon is Yeriach. Yeriach, which is H3394. Yeriach, spelled Y-A-R-E-A-C-H. And that's from the same as H3391, the moon. So it's literally talking about the moon. So at this understanding, he created the moon for seasons. All right. Now, if you look at the root word of Yeriach, you're going to get another word, Yerach, which is H3391. That's where Yeriach comes from. Yerach, spelled Y-E-R-A-C-H. And that's from an unused root of uncertain significance. A lunation, that is a month. So a lunation is a complete lunar cycle for a whole lunar season. So it's a lunar year is a lunation. So, excuse me, not a year. The whole lunar cycle from new moon all the way into the next new moon. That is a lunar month. So there's a separate word for a lunation that there is for an actual calendar month. But if you are worshiping the moon or giving it too much importance, you are going to do the same thing the Greeks did, the same thing the Babylonians did, the same thing the Egyptians did. But we not Babylonian. We not the Egyptians. We had a true living Elohim come to us and tell us how to do these things. They call it the lunar Soli calendar or whatever. Those are two pagan names. Luna and Sola, two pagans. So you're telling me that Yah came down here and gave you a pagan calendar? But the calendar that is the ancient calendar that was given to Enoch, that's the only calendar system in the entire world. And I've done the research. If you can prove me wrong, send me an email. I'm always open to learning. That's the only calendar, which is the calendar we use, Israelite Gathering, is the only calendar where the author of the calendar at least claims that they got that from the Most High. That's the only one. Every other calendar, some guy got it. Julian Caesar, Pope Gregory, Luna, the lunar god, Sola, all these, every other one came from some pagan god. So you have the moon, the Yeriach for seasons. So what does that mean for seasons? Well, we have come into the understanding that looking back at the cycle, how the season is your fall, your summer, your spring, your winter, all that. Those are your seasons. So how is he appointing the moon for our seasons? That's one type of season, the seasons in the year. You also have hunting season, fishing season. You have all these different seasons, agricultural seasons. The moon affects all of that. Even for when you have certain livestock, you want to, do certain things with livestock on certain days because of how the moon affects them, with even circumcision, with the blood and all that stuff is affected by the moon. So how more the moon deals with the seasons is when we have examined the lunar phases. If you go to the head of every season and you look at the lunar phase that you're in, you are going to see, if you're starting your season out correctly, you're going to see the same lunar phase. So when we had Rosh Hashanah, we had waning gibbous, which means it's leaving a full moon and now going into shadow. It's leaving the full moon. We had waning gibbous. When we had going into the summer, if you look at when we had our Rosh Hashanah for the summer, going into the summer, we had waning gibbous, the same lunar phase. And when we go down to the 7th month, when it started, starting the fall, we had waning gibbous. And when we go into the winter, we're going to have that same phase, leaving the full moon, going over into a crescent. Same phase. So the moon is confirming the season. It is a second witness. We had the sun and the stars tell us the season started. And now you have the moon for your season confirming that you are now into that season. But the moon will not do that for the month. You will not have the same lunar phase every month unless you're using a pure lunar calendar, where you're using a new moon, or whatever you consider a new moon as a beginning of your calendar. That's the only way it's going to match up. But if you do it that way, you're going to be off 10 days in the year. Or the other foolishness they do, they say, well, you know what? We realize that this thing is pushing us so far back. Hey, what the heck? Throw in another moon. Throw in another moon. Now you have 13 moons. Every so often now you have 13 moons, and they call it an Adar-2. Well, I didn't see no Adar-2 in here. You ever seen in this book say Adar-2? Adar number 2 during the month of Adar number 2. You don't see that in this book. So they're adding stuff. They're saying, man, this moon is not, it's not working. It's moving against everything else in the sky. I know, add another moon. That's a man that created that, because they want to make this moon their god. You can't do that. But if you use the moon for what it's for your seasons, there's your second witness. And now it doesn't have the same lunar phase, the beginning of the season every year. It changes from year to year. That's how you know what year you're in. Because then the next year, the head of every season, it may be a full moon, or it may be a waxing crescent. It may be a different, but it's going to be the same lunar phase, the beginning of every season, every year. Whatever season, whatever lunar phase it is for that beginning of a season, that year, it's going to be the same every year. And now there's no contradiction in what Psalms 104 is saying. It's for your seasons. Now let's look at I'm going to go to something. It's a website. It's Gardening by the Moon. The website is www.gardeningbythemoon.com. And then it's /phases, PHASES.html. I don't know much about farming. I grew up in a city environment, so I don't know nothing about that. So a lot of that stuff that makes sense to me. But when you're agricultural, or you're a husbandman, or you're from, an island, you understand some of these things, things that have been passed down to us about when you're supposed to plant certain things. The only thing most of the people I come from know when to plant marijuana. That's all they know. We're not agricultural people. So I went to this website and it was very interesting. We're going to look at some of what it says. It tells you about when you're supposed to plant certain things. All right, so I should have had this up already. Gardening by the moon.com /phases. All right, so it says, at the new moon, the lunar gravity pulls water up, causing the seeds to swell and burst. This factor, coupled with the increasing moonlight, creates balanced root and leaf growth. This is the best time for planting above ground annual crops that produce their seeds outside the fruit. Examples are lettuce, spinach, celery, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and grain crops. Cucumbers like this phase also, even though they are an exception to that rule. So it's letting you know, when you see that new moon, this is why we would pay attention to the moon. This is why it was important to us as husbandmen to understand the lunar phase. But it wasn't for us to understand the lunar phase so that we could now make our holy days follow this. This is for our trade. Just like if you're a hunter, it would be absolutely foolish to say it's hunting season. That means it's time to have Rosh Hashanah, or it's time to have, Passover, because hunting season is started. Hunting season is ended. That means there's no more holy days. You sound foolish. But that's what we have done by taking this lunar calendar. Now, in the second quarter, the gravitational pull is less, but the moonlight is strong. And this is when it's growing towards a new moon. To a full moon. The gravitational pull is less, but the moonlight is strong, creating strong leaf growth. It's generally a good time for planting, especially 2 days before the full moon. The types of crops that prefer the second quarter are annuals that produce above ground, but their seeds form inside the fruit, such as beans, melons, peas, peppers, squash, and tomatoes. It also says mow lawns in the first or second quarter to increase growth. Now, after the full moon, as the moon wanes, the energy is drawing down. The gravitational pull is high, creating more moisture in the soil. But the moonlight is decreasing, putting energy into the roots. This is a favorable time for planting root crops, including beets, carrots, onions, potatoes, and peanuts. It is also good for perennials, biennials, bulbs, and transplanting because of the active root growth. Pruning is best done in the third quarter in the sign of Scorpio. In the fourth quarter, that's where it's starting to move back towards a new moon, when it's becoming a dark moon again. There is decreased gravitational pull and moonlight, and it's considered a resting period. This is also the best time to cultivate, harvest, transplant, and prune. Mow lawns in the third or fourth quarter to retard growth. So you can see how this would have been important to us, especially with our first fruits, to harvest some of the things that we did to offer unto Yahweh. So this thing all had importance, and this is not even, we haven't even gone to fishing with the tides, because we know the moon controls the tides. It controls those seasons. So now it makes sense in Psalms 104. I appointed you the moon for your seasons, your different seasons. But I gave you the heavenly tablets for your calendar system, so that you can understand, and everybody else in the world, no matter where they were, would be able to understand how to keep Yah's holy days by simply looking up at the sky and seeing what's going on. Now, let's go for the conclusion. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 16. And I didn't even write it. I believe that's it. Deuteronomy 16. Devarim chapter 16. Now we're going to see a different Hebrew word being used for month. But because the translator decided and said, you know what? Oh, month is moon. So that means new month has to be new moon. That's what the translator put in. But if you look at the Greek and you look at the Hebrew, you see completely different words for month and for moon in both languages that were used in this Bible. So they could say, well, hey, look, you decided to follow that. You could have looked at the definition of these words. We're telling you what we do.
Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 16.
And verse 1.
Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto Yahweh your Elohim, for in the month of Abib Yahweh your Elohim brought you forth out of Egypt by night.
All right, so it says, observe the month of Abib. Hold your place right there. And it says, and keep the Passover unto Yahweh your Elohim. So when is Passover? What month?
Abib.
What number month is it?
First month.
It's the first month. So we know Abib is the first month. So how in heavens are you having Rosh Hashanah in the 7th month? Are there only 7 months in a year? Doesn't make any sense. That's somebody else's doctrine. That don't meet this book. And here go your second witness. Go to Exodus Shemot chapter 12. Hold your spot. We're coming back to Deuteronomy 16. And here we are, Israelites, following what Jewish people are doing, who got it from our ancestors and decided to apply their own pagan practices to it. And we're looking at Jewish people saying, well, we're the real Jews. These people are lying and they're saying us. They're us. I know that. But they know the truth better than us, so we trying to follow what they doing. How are you going to have somebody else that's not you try to teach you who you are? That's like me going to Jonathan saying, Jonathan, I'm Jonathan. I'm going to teach you how to be Jonathan. You have to be more handsome. You're going to have to be smarter, faster, more athletic. Just like me, Jonathan. Mm-hmm. He would be like, bro, if you don't get out of my face with this foolishness. But that's how low our spiritual self-esteem is. Instead of going to our continent where we learn this stuff, we want to go to the Europeans and learn this stuff, because we give more stock to the Europeans than want to turn around and say, oh, they the devil. That's a low spiritual self-esteem. They Esau. So you telling me white people Hebrews? Because that's what you're saying.
That's what you're saying.
You're saying they're Hebrews because Esau Hebrew. He's the same father and mother as Jacob. Low spiritual self-esteem. You calling that your brother? That's not your brother. That's a different type of people. A whole different type of people. Because even Japheth was melanin, was like us. So I don't know where them people came from. But you calling that your brother, but yet you want to turn to them and you want to have them teach you how to be you. Give it some time. In a few years, we're going to be looking to white people to tell us how to rap, how to be hip hop. We already did that with rock and roll. We already doing that with jazz. We already doing with all these different things. That's low self-esteem. Go back to your continent. They already got us saying we not African. We Middle East. We Middle Eastern. Show me Middle Eastern in this book. I didn't know there was a Middle Eastern tribe. No. You got North, South, East, West tribe. And if that's Middle Eastern, where's Eastern? Where's Western Eastern? Where's northern, eastern, and southeastern? That don't make no sense. But because this is what the masses do, and this is what a lot of people are doing with these calendars. Ain't nobody teaching people how to calculate this stuff. We're one of the few assemblies that will sit down and teach you how to do this, which puts us in a predicament, because now people can poke holes in us and say, hey, this don't add up. Well, we invite that, because if there's a hole in it, then we need to find out where the hole is. But they won't teach you these things. So what our people do, like sheep, man, I see a whole bunch of people doing that, so that must be it. It ain't going to work. Yahshua warned us about that. Wide is the path to destruction. You have to learn this for yourself, so you can make sure the people you follow is doing it right. And it could be right about everything else. Right about keeping the commandments, right about, behavior and morality and cultural things, and how you should dress and how you should have your hair and your beard. And they could be right about all that stuff and wrong about the calendar, because we had different people that was their job. That was their job. That's what their thing was. Just like all the parts of the body has what it's good at. My ear can't see anything. But if I had no eyes, my ear would be utilized to help me see without being able to see. But it ain't gonna, I don't care how developed my ear is, it ain't gonna say that's color red, that's color blue, that's north, that's south. It ain't gonna do that. Shemot chapter 12 and verse 1.
And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe and Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you.
So Yahweh told us when our first month is, not Jewish people. Go ahead.
Speak you unto all the congregation of Yasharal, saying, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the souls, every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Yasharal shall kill it in the evening.
Right, in between the evening is what the proper translation should have been if you look at the Hebrew word. But this is the 14th day of the first month. What is the 14th day of the first month?
Abib, Passover.
It is Abib, the month, and it is Pesach. That is your Passover. So the first month of the year is when you have your Passover. Witness number 2, and go back to witness number 1. Observe, back to Deuteronomy 16, Devarim 16 and verse 1. Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover unto Yahweh your Elohim. For in the month of Abib, Yahweh your Elohim brought you forth out of Mizraim by night. So the first month of the year is in the springtime. It is Abib. It's got nothing to do with atonement. Now, if we look at this word for observe, the month, Shamar, the Hodesh of Abib. So the word for month, they didn't say observe the lunation. They said observe the month, the calendar month. The new month, it's Hodesh, which is H2320, spelled Chodesh, Hodesh. And that's from H2318, the new month. By implication, a month, monthly. But in their translation, they put new moon, because they are using the moon to calculate their month. But there's a completely separate, different word for month that there is for moon or moon cycle. And in every other language, it is so. The only one that uses the same derivative is in English, month and moon. When you're in Greek, it uses numeneia for new month. But then for month, for moon, it's selene. Selene. We don't even sound the same. It's completely different. So they're letting you know it is completely different. Yahweh said for us to observe the Hodesh. He didn't say observe the Yirach, because that's what you are observing, the lunation. If you're using the lunar doctrine, you're observing the lunation of the moon. That is for your seasons. That is not for your calendar. So that's all we're going to do. We'll stop right there. As we go further on through classes, when we get through tabernacles, we'll start to go over, well, how do we calculate the month? And then once we learn to calculate a new month, then we can go over, well, how do we calculate the holy days? So that's all we're going to do today. Any last questions or comments before we close in prayer? All right. Let's go ahead and end in a prayer. All brothers remove their head coverings. And all sisters pray with their heads covered. And we face the east towards Jerusalem. Abba Father, Yahweh, Elohim, the Olive, Abraham, Yasha, Yaakov. Covenant Father, Elohim of Yahshua, we thank you once again, Yahweh, for allowing us to have our Yom Kippur, our Day of Atonement, Yahweh, allowing us a day, because you are so merciful, Yahweh, a day for us to become back at one with you, Yahweh, to be freed from the bondage of our sins, Yahweh, and give us an opportunity to reflect and focus, taking away us from our jobs and our work and our servitude, but allowing us a day, Yahweh, to just focus on ourselves, Yahweh, so that we can ask you the things that you are just waiting for us to give you the authority to come in and change these things within us, Yahweh. For you have given us free will to serve or free will to sin. And you have given us an opportunity, Yahweh, to bring these things before you and bring all those things before you, Yahweh, that we need help with, Yahweh. For we know that we cannot be holy by ourselves, Yahweh. It takes your spirit, Yahweh, your forgiveness, your mercy, your leadership through your Son, your word, Yahweh, for us to be made pure, Yahweh. So we're thankful that you gave us that day in peace. We're thankful that you put the desire in our hearts to afflict ourselves, Yahweh. For in this world, Yahweh, it's based on pleasure, Yahweh, and pleasing the flesh. You have put it in our hearts to afflict ourselves, Yahweh, by our own free will, not by anybody's forcing, Yahweh. You have allowed us to afflict ourselves, Yahweh, so that we can be more clear in our minds, Yahweh, towards the things that we need to work on. And we're thankful, Yahweh. We're thankful, Yahweh, also that you have sent us service and you have sent us the spirit of understanding, Yahweh, to move away from a lot of these old wives' fables and doctrines that have been taught to us from the heathens, Yahweh, in this search while we try to resume back into our heritage that we were cut off from according to your prophecy that you put before us, Yahweh. And we're thankful, Yahweh. And we know, according to the prophecies and the scriptures that have been given to us, Yahweh, that we still know in part and we prophesy in part. So we ask for you to continually be merciful to us. So these things that we are still doing improperly, Yahweh. And don't credit to disobedience, but credit to ignorance, Yahweh, as children that are still ignorant, trying to learn the right way, and send a servant and send a spirit of understanding, an angel, to lead us and keep us in the way, Yahweh, so we can do the things that please you, Yahweh. For that is our goal, Yahweh, is to do these things to please you, Yahweh, not to please man or please ourselves, Yahweh. So we ask these things, Yahweh, and all these things we ask without wavering, Yahweh, even though we know and we acknowledge that we are not worthy to come before you and ask of these things, Yahweh. But it's through faith and true belief through our works, Yahweh, and faith in your Son, Yahshua HaMashiach, that we ask these prayers and these supplications. Through him, Yahshua HaMashiach, we ask and pray, in which all glory, might, and dominion resides through forevermore. Through you, Yahshua, we thank and pray. Amen.
Amen.